There's a basic human tendency to think the moment we're living through right now is unique, more dramatic, more intense, maybe more dangerous than anything that came before. But when it comes to U.S. politics, that assumption might just be true. Less than half a year after the attack on the Capitol, the Republican Party has doubled down on the idea that the 2020 presidential election wasn't legitimate. And as former President Donald Trump re-enters the political fray, we're learning new details about his willingness to violate basic norms in his failed attempt to hold on to power. It's a lot to process and frankly pretty exhausting, enough so that you might want to take a break from politics for the summer. But journalist Edward-Isaac Dovere has other ideas. In his new book, Battle for the Soul, Inside the Democrats' Campaigns to Defeat Trump, he digs deep into the events that preceded Biden's win over Trump last fall. And it is a fascinating look, not just at the crowded and chaotic Democratic primary contest, but also at the way Barack Obama and other Democratic leaders struggled to wrap their brain around Trump's 2016 victory and the forces that propelled it, all of which, of course, are still with us today. And Isaac joins me now to discuss. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
I want to give viewers a sense of the level of detail that you convey in this book. One of my favorite parts is your list of the things that it takes to keep Bernie Sanders happy in a hotel room. Can you share a few of the things that he, in sort of a faux rock star manner, insists upon to be a happy guy when he's on the road?
Well, look, Bernie Sanders, his whole life was kind of an outsider. He was famous for, among the people who knew, always taking the middle seats on planes when he would fly between Washington and Burlington or anywhere else. But he shot to prominence in 2016 with that campaign, and he came to like a little bit of the good living. He liked that he had a charter plane that left when he was ready to leave, and he got used to some niceties on the road. He had specific instructions about his hotel rooms. They shouldn't be too near the elevator or the ice machine, so it wouldn't be noisy. He liked to say no to upgrades, importantly, but he would ask for certain snacks to be provided to him, very specifically outlined, and also was a stickler for the temperature in the room and the number of the blankets, and there needed to be a fan. And I think the part of the reason why details like that are interesting and why I included them in the book is it's part of giving you a window into who all these people are as human beings, because we can forget that sometimes. They're major political figures. Bernie Sanders, one of the most important political figures that is around right now. But with him, with Biden, Warren, Buttigieg, Harris, all of these people that we spend so much time thinking about as candidates, this book tells you who they are as people too.
One of the more serious examples of background detail, at least to my eye, that you get into, is the slow and I would say agonized way that former President Obama tried to come to terms with Donald Trump's victory in 2016 and tried to understand what the implications were going to be of Trump and Trumpism for the country. That's obviously a long arc from 2016 to at least when Joe Biden beat Donald Trump. But can you sketch out in broad strokes what his evolution was?
Yeah, the book starts on election night 2016 with these never before told stories of Obama and Biden watching Trump win. And part of the reason why I included those stories is because they've never been told before and they're just interesting stories. And part of it is because you see a lot of what was going on in the country and certainly in the Democratic Party reflected in those experiences. Obama, who starts out being surprised on election night, late at night, when he's putting out a statement to congratulate Trump. First of all, they couldn't find a phone number for Trump. They had to call Chris Christie, the governor of New Jersey, to try to get through to Trump. Then Obama puts out a statement and some aides say to him as they're writing the statement, "Do you want to include anything to reassure our allies around the world?" And Obama says, "I don't know what to say to them." He goes then through this process of thinking, oh, maybe I can work with Trump. Maybe I can convince him of some things. There's a meeting that they have in the Oval Office the Thursday after the election, 2 days later. I was there actually as a reporter watching that scene when they let the reporters in. It was insane. And Obama slowly over the transition gets more and more on edge, starts to see Trump's election as maybe reflecting what he would say as the country being more racist than he thought it was, that the country had sort of disappointed him in ways that he wasn't expecting. And then over the Trump presidency gets even more and more alarmed. And I think this is another thing to when you see the way that these people show up in public, and Obama gave people the sense that he was detached and not really getting too agitated. There are a lot of moments that you see behind the scenes of just how angry he was getting, how upset he was getting. So that by the time of the campaigning he was doing last fall, he's really seeing this as a truly existential moment for this country.
I want to ask you about Joe Biden and his process of discernment when it came to running for president, but I have to ask you just a reporting question. These details that haven't been out there before, how did you get them from people? Did you get them in the moment with the understanding that I'm going to use this stuff in a book down the road? I will not write about, what you've just shared with me until after the election? Or did you go back and try to get people to talk about what they were going through at different moments? What was your MO?
It was all of that. I started working on this book. The contract was signed in 2018. So I knew going into coverage of the race that I was doing for my day job at The Atlantic that this would be what I was working on. I told the campaigns and the candidates, said, I'd like to have you involved. I'd like to be able to speak to the candidates along the way and speak to you along the way I had a separate recorder, I had a separate notebook. And sometimes the candidates would make fun of me. They'd say, like, which recorder is this going on? But it gives it a sense of freshness and that window into how things went at the time. Often campaign books or any kind of like history book, when they're written after the fact, everything seems to make sense afterwards. Oh, it's this and that was the good decision, that was the bad decision. This book tries to get at what it felt like in that moment and what they were trying to do in that moment. And sometimes that's making mistakes. And then after everything was done, there was a lot of backtracking that I did, going back over things, reaching out to new people to find out more details of it. So I spent a lot of last year talking about things that happened in 2018 and 2019 when people were more freed up to talk about them.
I used the phrase slow and agonized to talk about Obama coming to terms with Trump, but I think it applies maybe even more to the way Joe Biden tried to decide if he was going to run for president. After having sort of a Hamlet act back in the 2016 cycle, your book conveys the extent to which he went back and forth and just couldn't quite make up his mind. Why was it so difficult for Biden to settle on what's obviously a huge decision, but also given the fact that he's been in politics his whole life, has run for president before, also seems like a pretty straightforward one?
Well, look, he's an ambitious politician. There's no question about it. Nobody runs for president as many times as he is not. But he was looking at what happened. It really starts for him in Charlottesville, even though he'd made some comments in the beginning of 2017. Maybe I'll run. If I'm walking, I'm running. Jokes like that. Charlottesville to him is this seminal moment. It's when what Donald Trump represents to him goes way beyond politics, where Republicans, Democrats, difference of like tax policy or whatever. And he thinks this is what he called the battle for the soul of this nation, right? And he carries that forward with him so that by the end of 2017, he's saying to people, look, I won't run if you can convince me someone else can beat Trump, but we need to beat Trump. And if nobody else can beat him, then I'll run. Of course, that's a little bit self-serving for a politician to say, but he then wants to make sure that he can do it in the way that he wants to do it, and pursuing a path to the presidency that a lot of people thought probably wouldn't work, that he was out of sync with the party. And the book ends with an interview I did with him on February 2nd. It was his first interview as president. And he said to me in that interview, people were saying all these things to me, but I said, if I do it this time, running at 77 years old, then I'm going to do it the way I want to do it. And just say, and to not get into any of the things that I don't want to do. And you see, as so much of the Democratic primary field moved in one direction or another, he would not. And it turns out that the way things went together for him, and there were a lot of factors that went into it, and they're all detailed in the book, but his way obviously was right. He won the nomination. He put together a coalition in November against Trump that, it's not to say nobody else could have won, but nobody else probably could have put together the exact coalition that he did. And that may mean that nobody else could have won.
I want to ask you a little about the relationship between Sanders and Elizabeth Warren, who obviously is of interest to our viewers.
Sure.
We got a peek publicly, all of us got a peek at some of the tension there. I think it was last January when there was this debate. There had been a story that came out right before the debate in which Warren said Sanders had told her he didn't think a woman could beat Trump. In the debate, he said that wasn't what he actually told her. And it led to one of my all-time favorite awkward political moments, which we can take a look at here.
I think you called me a liar on national TV.
What?
I think you called me a liar on national TV.
Let's not do it right now. You want to have that discussion, we'll have that discussion. You called me, you told me, all right, let's not do it now.
I don't want to get in the middle, but I just want to say hi, Bernie.
Yeah, good.
Treat this
Okay.
That last bit always gets
Tom
me
Steyer's
when Tom
cameo.
Steyer just slides on in. What was the nature of the Warren-Sanders relationship at the start of the 2016 cycle, and where did they end up?
Well, I think people sometimes mistake the fact that they have ideologies that often align and end up in the same place for seeing them as being similar people, or the route to how they get from point A to point B as being the same. They're very different people. They're very different thinkers. Bernie Sanders is a guy who came out of Brooklyn College, lived a kind of outsider life in Vermont, and then got into politics relatively early out, but in a weird outsider way. And Elizabeth Warren, of course, comes in to politics after building up her life to be a professor at Harvard Law School, right? And comes in as working in government and thinking about things in this very academic way of being. The first chapter that's about their relationship is entitled "Not Friends," right? And because they're barely the friends of the way that politicians say, "Oh, my friend from Vermont" or "my friend from Massachusetts." They had a very uneasy alliance. And that became obviously tested when both of them were running for president. They both were hoping that the other one wouldn't run. Both didn't like that the other one was in there. And it ended up causing a problem for both of them. Their supporters, who overlapped somewhat, were torn, but their supporters who didn't overlap were really opposed to each other. And then you see this all travel through a contentious primary time. Elizabeth Warren hoping that Sanders is going to drop out after his heart attack in October of 2019, to then Sanders expecting Warren should drop out when she did as poorly as she did in the first couple of primaries. And Warren, in these stories that I have of her talking to Obama about who she's going to endorse after she drops out, she can't decide whether to endorse Bernie Sanders because that'll be better for eventually steering him out of the race, or to endorse Joe Biden because that'll be better for putting an end to Sanders. But at that point, she is clear. She wants to do what's going to end the Bernie Sanders campaign and promote Joe Biden. Again, part of that may have been to, in a sort of Trojan horse way, endorse Sanders. And in the end, what she decided to do was endorse neither of them and wait it out.
I wish that we had more time. We actually have to wrap up, but I want to say before we close, I honestly always like reading your stuff. I've enjoyed seeing you on the campaign trail on occasion. I did not think I wanted to read a, 500 plus page book about the last election cycle, and it turns out I was wrong because the book is great. Isaac Dovere, thank you for being here.
Thank you.